Ya pokoknya yang penting akan dilanjutkan oleh Bapak Rulan Rinaldi, Senior Ekonomis Budget Policy Lead AIPEC. Tapi yang tetap aku present tetap Pak Davidnya.
Batik is our tradition of decorating our appearance with beautiful and colorful designs. It is our expression of love and harmony, the way our people celebrating life and all the beauty found in the majestic archipelago we call home. The process of batik requires a high level of art, crafting skill, perseverance, thoroughness, and dedication.
Siap, aku taruh sini.
We continue to embrace batik with our shared commitment to living in harmony with nature as we use renewable natural resources as material in batik production process. So we can continue to decorate our journey, lying ahead with peace and harmony.
Beberapa narsum itu sampai saat ini belum masuk room. Kita menunggu mereka.
enormous role in delivering public services where the presence of private sector is limited and in supporting economic recovery, especially
Batik is our tradition of decorating
Recording
our
in progress.
appearance with beautiful and colorful designs. It is our expression of love and harmony, the way our people celebrating life and all the beauty found in the majestic archipelago we call home. The process of batik requires a high level of art, crafting skill, perseverance, thoroughness, and dedication. We continue to embrace batik with our shared commitment to living in harmony with nature as we use renewable natural resources as material in batik production process. So we can continue to decorate our journey lying ahead with peace and harmony.
Berapa menit lagi ya? 5? Oke, kita cek dulu Syah.
batik is our tradition of decorating our appearance with beautiful and colorful designs. It is our expression of love and harmony, the way our people celebrating life and all the beauty found in the majestic archipelago we call home. The process of batik requires a high level of art, crafting skill, perseverance, thoroughness, and dedication. We continue to embrace batik with our shared commitment to living in harmony with nature as we use renewable natural resources as material in batik production process. So we can continue to decorate our journey lying ahead with peace and harmony.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, shalom, om swastiastu, namo buddhaya, salam kebajikan, salam Indonesia sehat. Good afternoon everyone, I hope you are all doing well and healthy. Welcome to Badan Layanan Umum or BLU EXPO 2021 and to our webinar today. And today we are going to discuss strengthening public services and economic recovery through state agency. And for your information, BLU EXPO 2021 and this webinar are presented to you by Direktorat Pembinaan Pengelolaan Keuangan BLU, Ministry of Finance of Indonesia. Don't forget to follow our Instagram on @ppkblu for more information about BLU EXPO 2021. Once again, welcome. My name is Tasha Kamila, and I will be the moderator of this webinar. It's a pleasure to be a part of this webinar, And although we still have to do this virtually, I hope that all of you are as excited as I am to engage in today's discussion. Through this webinar, we will learn about the roles of state agencies in developing public services and supporting economic recovery. Also, the challenges and the opportunities to improve their services in the post-pandemic era. Today, we will hear a keynote speech from the Vice Minister of Finance, Bapak Suhasil Nazara, who is, I think, already joined our session virtually. Hello, Bapak Suhasil, are you there? Apakah Bapak sudah bergabung dengan kita? Okay, maybe we'll hear more from him later. Also joining our session, 3 prominent speakers for today's discussion. The first one, special staff of the Minister of Finance for Regional Fiscal Policy Formulation, Profesor Chandra Fajri Ananda. Hello, Prof. Apakah Bapak juga sudah bergabung? Tampaknya sudah ya. And next, we also have the head of the Digital Government and Data Unit in OECD, Ms. Barbara Chiara Ubaldi. And also we have another speaker, which is the director of the Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Economic Governance, or IPEC, Mr. David Neller. Thank you for the speakers for joining in, and we're excited to have a discussion with 3 of our speakers later. All right, ladies and gentlemen, to start our webinar, let's hear a keynote speech from the Vice Minister of Finance. Please welcome Bapak Suhasil Nazara. Bapak Suhasil, you may start your speech.
Oh, okay. Very good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Very good afternoon. First of all, I would like to greet the Director General of Treasury, Bapak Hadianto, distinguished speakers from the Ministry of Finance Indonesia, OECD, as well as our colleagues at Prospera. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to ask everyone to continuously praise the God Almighty for giving us the chance to attend the international webinar this afternoon with the topic of strengthening public services and economic recovery through state agency. This is part of the State Agency EXPO in 2021, or the state agency, which is in Bahasa Indonesia is the Badan Layanan Umum, or sometimes we abbreviate with the BLU or BLU in Indonesian language. I would like to thank all the speakers and moderators for joining us this afternoon and sharing your knowledge to all participants about the role of state agencies in public service delivery and economic recovery in Indonesia and also around the world. I would like to welcome all attendees who attend this series of events of this BLU Expo 2021. I hope you all enjoy this event and gain a lot of useful knowledge from many of prominent speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, all the speakers and all of the participants of the web seminar. Obviously, we all know that we are living in a pandemic, then it's a challenge of our century. This is unprecedented, and right now, all countries are struggling to make sure that we can survive the pandemic. And of course, vaccination is one very important element of the fight to survive this pandemic. And at the same time, all the health protocols should all be observed in order to make sure that we are able to curb the infections. And this is also what happens in Indonesia. In the case of Indonesia, Indonesia was attacked by the Delta variant of the COVID-19 virus, and around June, July, August this year. And right now, for the Indonesian case, we see that the daily infection is quite low, and we hope that it would remain low. Ladies and gentlemen, if there are I would like to share with you the two lessons I always I always get from this COVID-19 pandemic. Number one is that if the infection is increasing, if the daily infection is increasing, we know that we can reduce it. We can put in place a number of travel restriction or physical contact restrictions or mobility restrictions, and we know with that, usually in the year and a half of our experience, we know that infections can be reduced. But there is a second lesson from this pandemic. That is, when the infection is low, it does not mean that the virus is on its way out. It doesn't mean that the virus is disappearing. It means that we have to continue to maintain all of our alertness, and in order to make sure that the infections do not come up again. The infections do not increase again in terms of its number. So it's very important to continue to be ready, to continue to observe the health protocol, vaccinations program, and so on. In the middle of this pandemic, Indonesia as a country, we are still keeping our mind as well on the long-term objectives of the country. We would like to make sure that the education is improving. The health, of course, is part of the handling the pandemic, but also we also continue to reach all of our long-term objectives as a country. And in this perspective, the role of a state agency is very important. BLU plays a very important role because BLU is a very flexible. In Indonesia, BLU received quite some mandate in a number of areas that are very, very important for the welfare of the people. The first area that BLU is handling is the education services. A number of education institution is take the form of BLU, a state agency in Indonesia. That is not profit seeking, and but at the same time is still undertaking the activities based on the principles of efficiency, productivity, as well as the good governance, but not profit seeking institution. The other area where the BLU is also very prominent is on the health. A number of hospitals in Indonesia is also the format of a state agency. So they are granted flexibility, especially in the financial management, in the asset management, in the human resource management, as well as a number of other flexibilities that are not available to the bureaucracy as a whole. But the state agency is granted such a flexibility in order to make them able to move very quickly, making cooperations very quickly with stakeholders. So BLU that was first introduced in 2005, firstly was very much into the health, hospitals, or education in terms of the universities. In later years, it has reached 252 BLUs this year, 252 state agencies by 2021. So this is the span of 16 years of state agency Indonesia. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, most of them is the higher level education, universities, and most of them are healthcare services such as the hospitals. Right now, The BLU in Indonesia, the state agency in Indonesia is also already improving into not only health and education. We also have a BLU that is that the mandate is to handle the regional economic development. It holds the certain Batam authority is a very important BLU that is a regional development BLU. And another very important types of BLU that is now very in the middle of its improvement in Indonesia is the BLU as the fund manager. We have a fund management for the Indonesian CPO. We also have a fund management for the education, which providing the scholarship for Indonesian graduates through the foreign universities. It is also a BLU under the Indonesian structure. So it is not only health, it is not only education or higher education area, but also fund management, regional development, and also other BLUs that are very much into the small medium enterprises. 2 days ago, I had the chance to attend the signing ceremony between two BLUs in Indonesia. The one BLU is what is called the Pusat Investasi Pemerintah, a BLU that is supervised directly by the Ministry of Finance, and the most important mandate of the Pusat Investasi Pemerintah or PIP is to provide the ultra micro credits. That BLU was signing a cooperation memorandum of understanding with the another BLU that is supervising what is called the Highland of Borobudur area. The BLU is called the Badan Pengelola Borobudur or Badan Pengelola Operasional Borobudur, Otorita Borobudur or BOB, which is basically a BLU that is mandated for the regional development, provided a mandate, an authority over the highland of Borobudur temple area, with a mandate to create another Bali for the areas around Borobudur. The BOB, the Borobudur BLU, understands very well. They can create a new Bali around the Borobudur area, but most importantly, they also understand that the benefit of opening the highland of Borobudur should also be felt by the people around the Borobudur area. So together with the PIP, the Pusat Investasi Pemerintah, Borobudur Authority opens up the region. They're creating new tourism destination, and the PIP, the Pusat Informasi Pemerintah, is going to provide a number of microcredit to the 4 villages around areas where the BOB is operating. This is a very important and very encouraging cooperation among our BLUs. What I just mentioned is an illustration how two BLUs can be very close and can cooperate together. I expect that in many years to come, this kind of cooperation among BLUs will become normal, will be more to see. And of course, the cooperation between two BLUs going to be very flexible, because BLU is flexible enough and can be very operational, because BLU can manage their own asset, they can manage their own human resources, can recruit professionals without having to be necessarily becoming a government employee, and can also manage their financial reporting in the way still in a good governance of bureaucracy, but with a number of flexibility. I expect that BLU will play a very more and more important role in Indonesia. And as some of you may have already noted, that during this BLU Expo 2021, some ministries in Indonesia and also agencies have already signed the MOU together to increase the synergy between institutions and their BLUs. There is a BMOU for accelerating synergy in the national hospital networks. There is an MOU to strengthen the digital talent and digital hub programs. MOU for the accelerating synergy in the micro, small, medium enterprises, and MOU for information system strategy integration for accelerating the halal certification. I expect that all relevant BLUs will start to implement the strategies that are signed through these MOUs, and I would like to see that more and more discussions, more and more BLU activities can benefit the people right way on the ground. And I expect that the stories about BLU can also be continued to be conveyed. Stories about BLU should be conveyed to the public, and this is going to be a very good story that is also going to be part of the G20 Indonesian presidency in 2021. I expect that the BLU will take an active role in succeeding Indonesia's presidency and translate the theme for the G20, Indonesia's G20 presidency, that is recover together and recover stronger, and BLU may be able to translate this into a number of concrete actions on the ground. I would like to close this remark by asking you to discuss the role of BLU and strategies to strengthen these roles. I'm very happy that all of you can join this seminar, and I wish you all fruitful discussions for the seminar today. I also hope that this event, the BLU Expo 2021, can be a place to promote products and services that are provided by the BLU. It is also a place to attract business partners for BLU. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a fruitful discussion this afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Bapak Suhasil Nazara, for the speech. From Bapak Suha's speech, we can highlight that despite being in such challenging time and circumstances, Indonesia, of course, has listened and learned about the needs of its people, and the government has prepared a set of policies and enforced strategies to thrive and survive this pandemic together. All right, everyone, it's time for our discussion on strengthening public services and economic recovery through state agency. The first session will be presented by Professor Chandra Fajri Ananda, the Special Staff of the Minister of Finance for Regional Fiscal Policy Formulation, and he's also an economics professor in Brawijaya University. For the next 20 minutes, we will hear from him about the recent economic development in Indonesia and how Indonesia could survive and thrive amid the pandemic. So without further ado, please welcome Professor Chandra.
Okay, thank you, Tasha Kamila, for the nice introduction, and also I would like also to thank to the committee for inviting me, sharing information what I know and what my responsibility is of finance. The other one is I would like to honor to Director General of Treasury, Bapak Hadianto, and also the Vice Minister of Finance, Professor Suhasil Nazara, and also the distinguished speakers, and also the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, when we see in the last 2 years, I think we have to see that the pandemic has already suffered our economy, and the some policy from government of Indonesia has shown some positive and make our economy is more in a positive way. So I would like to share the presentation. We start with the Indonesian economic condition in the recent days. So we start with the condition of Indonesian economic growth. So may I share my presentation? Okay. So the momentum of economic recovery remains strong actually, since principally what already Pak Suhasil Nazara has already informed us that the key of the recovery, of the economic recovery, is depending of the successful of the vaccination. And I think our achievement in the vaccinations, we can say in good condition. So that's why we see that the economic growth of Indonesia start from 2020 and now we are coming in the third quarter. We see that our economy is still good, although we are expecting that our third quarter is not 3.5, but we are hoping maybe in the number of 4.5%. But we see that we still have problem in the consumption, especially the household consumption and the government consumption. So that's why we are expecting in the next quarter, we are our consumption, especially in the government spending and also the consumption of the household will be increasing. So we see from this table. Now, we can also see in our indicator, economic indicator, most of the indicator PMI, electricity sales growth, and motorcycle and car sales, we see the growth of the three pictures. We see we are now in the positive trends. So we are still positive thinking. And when we see that our PMI and also electricity consumption show that there is economic activity happening in our community. So from this point of view, the government expecting that it's not only in the consumption and also PMI, we are hoping that with the PMI, the positive point of PMI, we can attract some investor coming to Indonesia. Next. So how about our APBN for our national budget? We are focusing now on the Delta variant COVID control in Q3, in quarter 3. We see that after the Delta in July or August, we see that the Delta variant really make our economy suffer. So from this point of view, we are hoping that in the next 2 months, we are still having doubtful problem, especially it could be maybe the third or the fourth wave of the COVID-19 is still exists. So we are hoping that it's not happening in our country. So we still see a positive way that when we can do our vaccination in the good way, and as our target, I mean, we are expecting in 70% should be achieved in the end of this year, although it's rather difficult, but when we get 60 or 50%, that will be good for our economy. So all the economic recovery programs is really depend on our vaccination. Next. So how about our domestic demand? We see that our domestic demand in our country, as we see all the programs of the government, especially against of the COVID-19, the government has already, not only we are focusing on the supply disruption, so we are giving more subsidy, we are giving more flexibility in tax, and also we are giving transfer fund to the people directly and also to the household. So from this point of view, we are expecting that our household and our investment growth still exists, and we see that the trend of the 2 points is still good way. But as I said before, that in July and August we have really attack from variant Delta, and also this is make our economy a bit suffer from this situation. So we are hoping that at the end of this year everything will be better. And how about the export and import? So export and import is actually showing that the data show that our import is also in higher increase, especially before the end of Q3. And what this mean? It's mean that our production is still going well. So we don't have any difficulties in supply disruption. And also in our export, we see that in the beginning of the 2021, we still have problem actually in the export, since our market export is still a problem. Now they are getting better, especially in the China and US economy, and that's why the export is also better. And also we cannot forget also that the price of commodities is also better at the present. So from this point of view, we see that export and import is still in a good positive trend. So how about the main production sector can grow positively in the mild of Delta variant? So we see here in the pictures that during the Delta variant, we still have a good achievement, especially in manufacturing and trade, and also mining and health services, so construction, agriculture, information and technology, and tourism. Although we still have problem at the end of the Q3, but the trend is positive. So we see that as long as the vaccination progress is good, that will be make easier for our economy to be recovered. So the resilient sector, for example, during the pandemic, such as information and communication sector, so and the agriculture sector, and we see the both sector is really the resilient ones. So we are expecting that, especially in the agriculture sectors and information and communication, that will be always better. I mean, until the end of this year. The other one sector why our export is good is actually the price of commodities increased significantly. So the next, yeah. So we see here start from coal and also natural gas and oil, and we see this all commodities is really helping our economy at the end of this year. So we are hoping that the situation of this price commodity will be better. I mean, for our economy, since the domestic consumption, especially for the government and also the household, still remain low. So we are expecting, especially for the government consumption, the central government, especially the Minister of Finance, always push of the local government spend more and more and spend better to help our economy, especially to achieve our target. So how about the community activities? As I told before, actually the community activities is still continue. So the mobility and also the retail and recreation, although it's a bit disturbed, I mean, during July and August, but especially when we see in the picture, grocery, pharmacy, retail and recreation is still a good way. So the number is still higher than, I think, 2020. How about in our regional economy? So actually the picture of Indonesian economy can be divided. Maybe we see that the island of Java and Sumatra is actually predominated our economy. So almost 80% of the economic activity in Indonesia is happening more in Java and also Sumatra. So almost 80%. So how about Bali? So meanwhile, Province Bali and Nusa Tenggara, mostly supported by tourism sectors, experience a slight contraction. So as we have already discussed previously, like Pak Swahasil Nazara also told us that Bali, especially for tourism regions, is also suffering from this variant Delta. Now we are coming to the second topic is about the BLU, state agency. I think for continuous work, I will use BLU in Indonesia, concept on objective. So the concept of a global agency is to improve the financial management and control with flexibility. So the point is actually how can we develop the management for control and also the flexibility. So that's why from this point of view, we see the institution problem and also the human resource quality and also the financial and control. So this is the point, how can we improve the management control? First is we see that economic value is very important. So sometimes the BLU is conducted not more in the modern management with transparency and good corporate governance, but is less than this GCG. So the economic value is very important. And also we have to impose what we call the concept of new public management. So how can we use the performance indicator? How can we use the measurement of all activities in the business? And also how can we involve the professionals like what Pak Suhasil said, that we can also hire the professional coming to BLU. And then the other one is the service-oriented organization needs. The BLU is not only to get the profit maximum. So the BLU is also have tasks, especially to serve for organization to the people. So that's why these two functions sometimes is rather difficult to execute it with a good way. That's why the better responsibility and accountability should be inputted in the process of the business of the BLU. So we see here the application of word agency. So there are many ways. So in Netherlands, for example, they have almost 630 agencies. And so the Sweden, they have 478 agencies. And also New Zealand, so they have 95. So Australia, they have 169. And so Thailand, they have only 29 agency in 2009. So it's mean almost more country in the world, they have BLU, some like BLU, so to serve the people. Next. So how about in Indonesian term, what is BLU? The characteristic of BLU, first, government agency. So BLU is government agency, so formed by the government. And second one is manage the delivery of public services with sound business practices. So the main objective is actually public services, but with sound business practices. So it is, so the BLU should be flexible between 2 points. So they have to serve public services and also they have to deliver business practices. And third is not prioritizing profit. So profit is not the most priority. And fourth is prioritizing productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness. So the point is the BLU should be productive, should be efficient and effective. So this is some regulation legally for supporting the BLU. And the objective is actually improving services to the community in the context of advancing general welfare and educating the nation life. So this is the objective or the goal of the BLU in Indonesia. And now we are coming to the comparison of institutional characteristics. So we see here between BLU and maybe private sectors. So we see there are two extreme conditions. So the left one is the government. So they have more in the bureaucracy reform, more people from the bureaucracy work there. And the other one is the private sector. So they are so professional. Inform is persero in bahasa Indonesia, or state-owned enterprises. So the BLU should work in the between this situation from the maximum. So from private sectors and the government. So from this point of view, we can say that the BLU is a semi-public goods. Semi-public goods. So that's why I said before that the BLU should give basic services, delivery basic services, but with the business process. So how is we see the institutional comparison between government unit, BLU, and state-owned enterprises? So the orientation, so BLU is not for profit. Wealth and asset, for example, what from government unit or in Bahasa maybe we call as satker, yeah, not separated, but BLU not separated, but state-owned enterprises is separated. And also in management, regulation, and so on. So you can see here, for BLU, tax is not subject, but for state-owned enterprises is subject. From this point, some factors difference between different aspects from government unit, BLU, and state-owned enterprises. Actually, BLU is still more closely to the government unit. So, as Pak Suhasil already informed us that the grouping of BLU, we are not only in the health sectors. We have also BLU in education, like LPDP. So we have also some university and polytechnic in the form of BLU. And also we have some area business. And we have also fund for asset management, for example. And also we have other goods and services, some pusat pelayanan teknologi, for example, and also what Pak Suhasil already informed us, the new one is like pengelola Borobudur or something. So we see here that the BLU is not only in the health. So they have also in education and also area management and funding or fund management and also other goods and services. So from finance and policy, from BLU, so we see here that the number of revenue of BLU increase from year to year from 2016 to 2021. And the government or the Ministry of Finance is already targeted that in 2022, the BLU should increase their income. So the realization of PNBP of BLU, so PNBP is tax revenue, state revenue from non-tax, of non-tax. From BLU is in 2020 is about 69.68 trillion, and it is increased almost 40%. So the PNBP increases significantly in 2020. So BLU revenue in 2021 is estimated to reach 78 trillion. So we are expecting in the next short year, in the next year, for example, so the target is increasing from 78 to 82. So the policy, government funding from ratio is decreasing because the role of BLU is increased. So prioritizing improving the quality of services that are affordable, available, and sustainable. Second one is improve the governance to oversee the improvement of BLU performance. So the governance or improving the GCG, the GCG of the government of BLU is very important. Optimizing BLU cash management to improve quality services, especially in the financing, and then modernization of BLU management through the use of information technology is also important. This is some policies from the government to improve the quality of BLU in the next future. So how is the economic contribution of the BLU, especially strengthening the state revenue? So we see here the BLU number, characteristics, asset, and stakeholder. So we have the BLU totally is 251 BLU. So from 22 kementerian lembaga. So we can see here health. So we have 106. This belong to for kementerian lembaga. Education we have 106 from 7 kementerian and lembaga. And fund is we have 9. And area management 6, and others is 24. So non-tax revenue or PNBP should be increased 22% in the next future on the target. So how about the human resource? So SDM BLU or human resource BLU tend to increase. especially we see here the number of PNS is still higher, state-owned services or employee. So the number is from 108 in 2019 is becoming 151 in 2020. So non-ISN, so non-state employee, the number is not so significantly increased, but still remain the same. Okay, so the economic contribution, we see here the most bigger one is from palm oil. So since the commodity price or the palm oil price increasing in the world market, I think the BLU condition will be better, as we see here in the data. So the realization of PNBP in 2020, as I said before, is increasing from the target is about 40%. Why the increasing is happening is because I think the price of the palm oil price in the world is now increasing significantly. So BLU contribution in the economic recovery. So from the fund placement, so the government prepares almost 66 trillion, and this is the purpose is to support credit restructuring and channel additional new working capital. So the output of this policy is almost, I think, more. I think it's about 323 trillion credit to 4.7 million debtors. So, and then we can the government also do what we call is income tax for small medium enterprises. So the output is almost small medium enterprises 248 thousand, yeah, and for SME have a certain gross turnover and subject to final income tax. So and also in the credit guarantee, so the BLU also support, especially BLU for fund, they are supporting for debtors is almost 800,099. Also in investment, we call it LBDB. So the output is almost 84 cooperative partners and also almost 118,000 SMEs supported by LBDB, and also BPUM and also interest subsidy. So this is some kind of BLU roles, especially in the economic recovery program nationally. BLU contribution in economic recovery. So we see here the corporate guarantee through LPAE. So one of our BLU. So we see here the realization, and also we are hoping that total debtor is now is 36 debtors with payment loss almost 31 billion, sorry, and guarantee capital credit is 2.11 trillion. So we see here the role of BLU, especially in pretending or supporting the business sectors to improve them in financing management. And corporate guarantee data we see here in the province of Indonesia, especially in Jawa Timur and East Java and also Central Java. So the value is very high because, as you see, like before, as I said before, Jakarta, Jawa Tengah, Jawa Barat, Jawa Timur is actually almost 60% of the Indonesian economy. So this is a logic when we see that the funding is going to this province. So BLU contribution to public services, especially improving health, improving education, poverty eradication, food security, regional development, energy security, international relation. So this small of area where BLU supporting of the government programs. Now it's coming to public services contribution. So this is only other data to show how BLU role in our recovery economic programs, especially in some sectors. So this is also some perguruan tinggi or university supported with BLU form. And also in the public service contribution, we have some kementerian and lembaga supported this policy for BLU. Now we are coming to the challenges. So what is the challenges actually of BLO in Indonesia, especially to strengthen the regulation? First, the BLOs we see from our presentation in the beginning. So BLO supporting economy and fiscal stabilization. So BLO can help our national revenue. BLO can also stimulate and also accelerate all the economic program, recovery economic programs done by the government. So BLO is one of a good strategy. And the other one is BLO should strengthen the governance. So as I said before, the need of the improvement of the BLO is how can we improve the GCG of BLO. So institutional and management officer, so the obligation to make manual board or something, and governance and stabilizing business unit, and also risk management of the fund manager of BLO. This is some maybe in the private sector is normal, but I think for our BLO should be imposed in the all business process within the BLO. And the other one is coaching and supervision. So management of coaching by KL, BLO councils and committees, directors, both trustee and others. So it's very important coaching and supervision, since as you see that our human resource quality is still be improved in the next future. And KPI-based remuneration is also very important. And the other is BLO government assessment. The two things is another one is improving accountability. As I said before, that the GCG of the BLO should be improved. It's mean the improving accountability.
Sorry
is very
to interrupt,
important.
Professor Chandra. Would like to remind you that your session time is almost done. So maybe a couple of takeaways from your presentation, please.
Okay, yeah, okay. I only have only one policy that should be improved for BLO. And the last one is tariff and remuneration. So we see tariff is very important actually for one point to improve the BLO quality, like standardization of services and incorporation of BLO tariff based on KL or service family. So we see this should be improved. And the other one is the application of zoning tariff. So the tariff, they should be not the same, but it should be based on the zona and also the cost of the services. And second one is strengthening the analysis of tariff. Yeah, as I said before, the tariff not should be the same between BLO, but it should be depend on the calculation. Theoretically, this should the cost of providing delivery of services. The last one is collective remuneration based on the termination periodization. So this is the 4 point, maybe the key of improving of the BLO in our country in the next future. Thank you, moderator, and
Thank you.
I hope that the BLO will be better in the next future.
Thank you, Prof.
Warahmatullahi
Chandra, for the insightful presentation. And from Prof. Chandra's presentation, we learned that despite the emergence of Delta variant earlier this year in Indonesia, our economic growth remains strong. We also learned how state agencies play crucial roles in strengthening the state's non-tax revenue, supporting businesses and delivering public services. So all in all, state agencies are key in reinforcing our national economic recovery. And ladies and gentlemen, we will have Q&A session later. So if you have any question regarding today's topic, please do not hesitate to write your questions on the chat box. The speakers will answer your question later in the Q&A session. All right, earlier we've learned about Indonesia's efforts in economics recovery. Before we move on to the next speaker, I'd like to ask you something. Raise your hand if you don't have a smartphone. Even though I cannot see you, I can sense that no one is raising their hands. I believe that smartphone is always attached to our hands. This is the era of connectivity and digitization. And in fact, we are currently using Zoom or watching YouTube to join today's session. So we are active internet users, and this brings us to an interesting question. How to enhance public service in the digital age? To answer this question, please welcome the head of the Digital Government and Data Unit in OECD, Ms. Barbara Chara Ubaldi. Ms. Ubaldi, you
Hi,
may
good morning, everyone. I hope that you can hear me and see me well.
Yes, we can.
Yes. And so good afternoon, everyone. It would have been much nicer for me to be there with you. We are really honored from the UCD side for having been invited to share our thoughts about how to improve service design and delivery in the digital age. I would have liked better to be in person with you, but perhaps the pandemic will allow us to gather again in physical presence in 2022. But I think that your introductory points were very topical and very critical in the sense that I think not only the question is who doesn't have a smartphone, but the question is how many of you have just one smartphone? Because I think many of us have a smartphone, have a tablet, have a computer. So we have a number of tools that we constantly and use on a daily basis for our interactions to be productive, to be professionals, and to access our services in the private sphere. So, and if you can please project my presentation, I'd be very thankful. So the question is, how can governments stand up to the expectations that companies and people have when it comes to being able to access public services with the same easiness, facility, and digital competence that they have when accessing services in the private sphere. And what we've seen in the OECD in the past 12 months is the need to change the narrative. We have a big horizontal initiative in the organization called Going Digital that for many years had tried to pass the message that if economies and societies were going digital, governments too had to go digital. Where I think that the pandemic demonstrated quite strongly how governments had to demonstrate to be digital. They had to show that they could be overnight capable to keep working electronically, digitally. So many civil servants had to be working remotely, but also governments had to demonstrate that they could keep providing public services with continuity. Not only people had new needs that were rising in connection to the pandemic, but they also had to keep accessing basic services like renewing documents, like accessing benefits they were entitled to, or engaging with the schools of their children. So the key question remains now, how can we make sure that as we recover, we also strengthen the resilience of our governments, which implies also the capacity of governments to use digital tools. If you can go back to the previous slide, please. Which means being able to use digital tools to be able to increase the maturity of digital governments for providing services which are more human, fair, and sustainable. They are driven by the needs of the users and strengthening the capacity of governments to deal with challenges which are more complex and global. So it's essential for us to help governments advance in this shift from e-government to what we call digital government, which simply said is much more, means much more than digitizing our processes. In the e-government age, much of the focus of governments was on transferring online processes, procedures, and practices that existed offline. Whereas in the digital government age, the idea is really to make the most of digital tools and data to be able to rethink and redesign our processes, how we design and deliver services, and how we interact with the users of the services. So can we make the most of technology to change how governments function to deliver better results? Next slide, please. And this is a very difficult change to implement in terms of paradigm shift in government. It's easy said, but it's not easily done, which is why since 2014, the OECD with the recommendation on digital government strategies has had the purpose of helping government in this shift towards a more digital government, focusing on the use of digital tools and data to foster governments that are more participatory and open, rethinking the governance of digital government, and the creation of the agency that we are talking about. It's essential. It's an essential step to be able to connect the dots and support the whole administration to design and deliver better services. And last but not least, trying to understand what kind of capacities do governments need to have in place, where by capacities, we do not only think about the talent and the skills, but we also think about tools the governments need to have inside of the public sector to be able to work cohesively and coherently, and also the way to manage core government processes like procurement, like budgeting, like HR management in a way that supports the digital transformation. Next slide, please. So the recommendation has been applied in over 30 projects, bilateral projects, peer reviews with countries, but also regional projects in Latin America, in the MENA region, in the Lusophone countries, to be able to understand, okay, then if we apply the recommendation, how does a digital government look like? So what are the key characteristics that make a government really digital? Where in the view of the OECD and the OECD policy framework for digital government, we've identified 4 foundational characteristics that make a government really digital, which is being digital by design, which differs from being digital by default. When we talk about being digital by design, we talk about being digital inside of the public sector, inside of the government. So yes, we have to forget the paper for reasons of efficiency, accountability, transparency, and integrity. But we need to remember that not all citizens perhaps are digital, and therefore maintaining points of access and contact with citizens which are not digital should remain a priority. So when we think about digital by design, we think about inside of the government. Second, it's a data-driven government, meaning makes the most of data as a key strategic resource like people and money. Third, is capable to act as a platform. When we think about a government as a platform, we think about a government that provides, for example, guidelines, standards, common tools, common platforms for the different parts of the public sector to work with each other, to connect, to be coherently advancing in the digital transformation, but also provides the space to collaborate with the broader ecosystem. For example, with startups on testing and experimenting the use of artificial intelligence within the public sector. Fourth, it's open by default, meaning not only opens up data, but also opens up policy, design, and service design and delivery processes. If these 4 foundational characteristics get stronger, then a government most likely grows more mature also on the 2 transformational characteristics of a digital government, which is being user-driven. Being user-driven means providing the space for the users of the services to voice out their needs. So it's not about trying to interpret what the user of a public service needs, but it's about asking the user, hearing the user, coming back to the user with the solution that better resolves the needs, and having a feedback loop mechanism that shows how government listen to the users and respond to the users, like the Vice Minister said. And last is being proactive, meaning bringing the data and bringing the service to the user before the user needs to ask for it. We know a number of examples in which SMSs, for example, are sent proactively to the citizens, either when they have a document to renew, passport that is coming close to be expired, or when a new child is born, parents receive messages indicating their obligations, but also their rights vis-a-vis or concerning the interaction with the public sector. And this is a proactive way of being present in the citizens by flagging services that they can access. Next slide, please. So the challenge for us has been not only to accompany governments from a policy point of view. So the framework I just mentioned is a framework that meant to accompany governments in understanding what kind of policies they need to decide upon, what kind of changes they need to put in place when it comes to rethinking about the broader environment. But then we also wanted to accompany governments in measuring and assessing their progress towards being real digital governments. So the Digital Government Index of the OECD that was launched for the first time in 2019, and which is built on the recommendation and on the policy framework, aims to monitor, to help governments monitor their progresses towards being really digital. And what's been very interesting for us is to look at some of the main trends that we could observe in the index in 2019, which show that governments are probably more prepared when it comes to the foundational dimensions that I presented. So they have been investing on e-government for many decades, and therefore, when it comes to using technology within governments, they are more prepared, but they are less prepared when it comes to the more transformational dimensions of digital government, which means that there's still space for growth and improvement when it comes to using digital tools and data strategically to transform and change how governments function, being more integrated, being more horizontal, bringing down the silos, and like a colleague from Sweden would say, hacking the bureaucracy and trying to really make the machine more agile, more adaptive, and more innovative. Next slide, please. So if we try to connect the digital government agenda with service design and delivery agenda in the digital age, which are some of the fundamental building blocks that we think a more mature digital government has at its disposal to improve how services are designed and delivered. First of all, the governance of digital government, precisely like we are discussing today, having an authority, a public sector organization in charge for setting the vision and identifying the key actions to improve public service design and delivery, making the most of the resources available, also in the digital sphere, is essential. Second, we need to rethink how the digital government investments are made, and I'll come back to this point in a few slides. Third, thinking about the kind of digital skills and talent that need to be in place to support the digital transformation is about having the multidisciplinary team that gathers experts on the use of data, on the use of emerging technologies, on the use of technology more broadly, but also having psychologists, scientists, architects, people who can connect the tools, the use of the tools with the broader environment, and also having people who know the business of the public sector, meaning people who've been part of the machine for many years, who probably better than others know what are the real needs of the users. Data governance is essential, because if we want to be able to use data as a key strategic asset, we need to be able to have a holistic approach, a whole of government approach. We need to have the right regulations that facilitate the sharing of data and the integration of data. We need to have the data architecture that needs to include, for example, standards, guidelines to improve data quality. And we also need to have the possibility of increasing data access and sharing within the public sector and with the broader ecosystem of the open data community, for example. Last, key enablers like the digital identity, which enable to provide services which are more trustworthy, more reliable, more easily accessible, is a key building block. Next slide, please. So if we go a little bit more in depth on some of the foundational elements that I just mentioned, from our perspective, being able to invest in digital government more strategically is essential as we move ahead. What we've seen in many countries in the OECD is that in many cases, the different steps concerning the financial management of the resources linked to digital government are very disconnected from each other. Whereas there's an absolute need to be able to become stronger on how governments are capable to provide a value proposition, meaning how are they capable to assess the cost and benefits of the investments they want to make on digital. Second, aligning these decisions with the budget timeframes, meaning if there are specific timing in which budget is negotiated and the digital strategy is defined and investments on digital are defined, these two needs to go hand in hand. Resource allocation and spending, so the whole procurement process needs to be adjusted also to the needs of the digital transformation, being able to spend with agility. Many times the procurement processes are extremely long when it comes to traditional investments. If we want to be innovative and if we want to be able to improve the design and delivery of services, which implies working with a whole set of actors like startups, for example, then it means that we need to rethink how the procurement process can support this digital transformation. And last but not least, there's an absolute need to monitor how investments are producing an impact or not, to be able to take corrective measures when we still have the time to take them before large ICT projects become failures. So the idea of thinking strategically about digital government investments and therefore connecting communities within governments, the budget people with the digital people, with the procurement people, is essential to be able to identify, quantify the short-term costs with the long-term benefits and reconciling investments with the gains that we want to get out of digital, having tools that can be commonly used across the public sector. Next slide, please. Second, thinking about key enablers like the digital identity will be essential in the future to be able to provide services that are more responsive to the needs of the users. Digital identity, and here I'm not talking about the technical solution chosen, but I'm thinking about recognizing the importance of having the management of identity as a service, and therefore using digital identity tools to be able to identify with certainty the people, to be able to guarantee the data, personal data is managed, is accessed and is used by the public sector in a way that protects privacy and security, and also gives the possibility to people to consent on how the data is being used. Therefore giving to the people the ownership and the visibility on how their data is being shared, and having a more trustworthy way to interact with the people. So the government being able to identify if the person who wants to access a specific service is the person that is being claimed to be, but at the same time, for the people to have the possibility of interacting with the public sector in a more secure way will be essential in the future. This turns out being a necessity as people move more and more across borders. Therefore, having systems which are interoperable with each other, having systems that enable the portability of the digital identity is going to be essential. I think the pandemic demonstrated more than ever how important it is to be able to identify people even as they move across borders. People remained outside of their own country for many months because they could not leave the country in which they were. Well, if the country that was hosting them had been able to identify those people with security, with certainty, and with easiness, doing it online and digitally, it would have been much better. For all those governments who had digital identity systems in place, it was much easier to keep continuing delivering services with continuity and without interruption. Next slide, please. Third, governments really need to rethink how they approach the design and delivery of public services, which still here many governments who want to improve how they deliver services, so the responsiveness of the services to the needs of the users. Well, we need to start with how we design the services. Too often, the two elements, the design and the delivery, are not connected. Too often, governments do not pay enough emphasis, attention, and importance on the design of the service, and on how this service is being designed is very much linked to the context of the country. It's very much linked to the general enablers being available in the country to design the service, and it really depends very much on the needs that exist across the society. So I was talking yesterday with an OECD member country, which is very highly digital, like Finland, and they were saying we have issues with connectivity because of the size of the country, because of the geography of the country. So we know that rather than investing on connectivity, we should invest on mobile to be able to, so on 5G, to be able for people to access services in an easier way. So this to say that the approach to design and delivery is essential because it helps to find the best solution for the specific needs of the country. Next slide, please. So what does it mean having this strong focus on design and delivery? First of all, the governments need to invest on researching to understand the needs of the users. They need to address the problem end to end, as we say. So we really need to think about the journey of the user, starting from the need, and the need belongs to a specific context. So it happens in a specific context, up to the finalization of the solution that is brought to the need. And that, in many cases, implies testing and experimenting the solution with the final user. So we need to have the idea of having an approach which is iterative to make sure that the provision of the service responds better to the need and also is resilient in the provision of the need in the long term. This requires definitely a commitment from the leadership, because this requires resources, this requires a different approach, this requires a different methodology on how the services are designed and delivered. So not only we need to have the skilled people, for instance, people who do user-centered service design, psychologists, like I mentioned earlier as well, architects who understand for instance, the geographical context in which, or the city context, or the rural context in which a service is being provided, but we also need to have the right leadership to support this new way of addressing the design and delivery of the service. Next slide, please. But the other important requirement for governments is that we should not forget the people who are not in the position to access services online. So designing and delivering services in the digital age does not mean that we should aim to bring everybody online. There are some countries that have done it, like Denmark. They have had the strong strategic goal for 3 decades of being able to make all interactions between the citizens and the businesses mandatory online. Still, even Denmark recognizes that there are groups of citizens who cannot, either for disabilities, for accessibility reasons, or because they don't want to access services online. It's a constitutional right in most countries for citizens to be able to interact with the public sector in the way that they find more suitable to them. So the idea of using digital and using data to improve design and delivery does not mean closing down channels. The idea of having an omni-channel service delivery approach, which is a bit different from the multi-channel, is, however, to think that inside of the government, we need to be digital. So we need to make sure that all procedures, steps, processes are digitally managed based on a higher possibility of sharing information and data and connecting the different parts of the administration and simplifying the administration when it's possible inside, and provide the same quality of the service regardless if the people want to access it online, using a mobile phone, or going physically to an office. So the idea is that the omni-channel paradigm does not see the different channels as being separate, but they see the different channels as like different doors to the same good quality of service. Next slide, please. But as we make the most of the digital tools and data for rethinking design and delivery, governments need absolutely to pay a lot of attention to a number of new ethical issues that are emerging in the digital age and in the digital sphere. So the more data-driven approaches call, for instance, for an awareness on the ethical concerns around the use of data and the use of artificial intelligence. So efforts to increase the transparency on how data is being used, on the algorithms that are being used, for example, will be essential in the future. Countries like France, for example, have adopted laws that not only call for the opening up of data, but also for the opening up of algorithms used by governments, because we know that the use of data can lead to biased decision if the data chosen are biased. Therefore, ethical approaches around the use of data will be essential. Regulation, rethinking how regulations can support the digital transformation, so it's not a blockage, but supports innovation, but at the same time, what kind of regulation can support the use of digital tools that protect citizens' rights, for example, that enable us to protect privacy of data and security on how certain tools are being used. There are new digital rights that are emerging in the digital age. For example, the fact that citizens should have the right to give consent on how their data is being used. But more and more, we also hear about the right to disconnect. The pandemic has made it's an opportunity for people to be able to keep being productive online, but then many people started identifying an over request for them to be present online to the detriment of their well-being. So now there's a movement calling for the right to disconnect, for example. There are concerns around the talent needed as we become more automated, for example, in governments and in businesses. We know that there are big concerns on job losses, for example. So it's extremely important, especially if we look at the public sector, that we consider the concerns of civil servants, and we think about not only attracting new skilled people, but also we think about retaining people, and also we think about retraining people, so that the idea is that as digital becomes a reality, this provides opportunities and this does not create new forms of exclusions, which is why governments need to be aware that as they become more digital or now they provide services, the idea of fairness, equitability, and inclusiveness will remain key concerns from the public. Next slide, please. And to conclude, why is this so important? Because at the end of the day, what matters is not technology. What is important is not the fact that we can demonstrate that we are using, for example, artificial intelligence in the public sectors. What counts a lot is that a digital government that is capable, like I said, to use digital resources and data to deliver better services is a government that can increase the demonstrated capacity to protect citizens, to protect and increase the well-being of citizens, to reinforce democratic systems, and therefore is a government that can increase public trust and can make its legitimacy stronger. So thinking about connecting the dots between how we decide on digital, how the digital resources enable the government to better design and deliver services is not an option, but is a necessity to be able to demonstrate that as governments, we are capable to better respond to the needs of the citizens, and therefore we are capable to be more trustworthy, and we are capable to better connect with the people that we serve. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Ubaldi. Okay, so
sorry, just one point actually with this slide that we've been actually working a lot from the OECD side with the G20 in the past, I would say 5-6 years within the working group on the digital economy. It used to be a task force on the digital economy. Now from this year, and I'm very happy about this, the task force has become a working group on digital economy. I'm saying I'm very happy because I think that's a strong recognition on the importance of policies on digital economy and digital government as being core to economic growth and social well-being. And we've been working under the presidency of Italy in 2021 on 2 key products. The first one, it's an output that looks at how digital tools can improve better service design and delivery. And second, it's an output on digital identity that acknowledges, as I said, the relevance of having digital identity tools to support the better delivery of public services. So we look forward working with Indonesia in the year to come to see how we can connect the agendas of recovering back and recovering more strongly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ubaldi. Yes, hopefully we're going to have partnerships and collaboration with the OECD and also Indonesia government. So a couple of takeaways from the presentation. First of all, continuous transformation is a must in this digital age. Governments have a critical role to shape the transformation and the digital ecosystem towards contributing to broader outcomes and public interest. And in the end, digital transformation will improve citizen satisfaction and strengthen the trust and legitimacy of institutions. This is very important, especially for BLU, in order to provide more access and reach out to more people so that more people can utilize and enjoy its services. Okay, up next, let's learn about the roles of BLU in supporting the economic recovery And this session will be presented by our last speakers, the Director of IPEG or Prospera, followed by Bapak Rulan Rinaldi, Senior Economist and Budget Policy Lead IPEG. So everyone join me in welcoming Mr. David Neller. Mr. Neller, we cannot hear you. Can you please unmute yourself?
Okay, now it lets me. I was a participant before, I think, and it wouldn't let me. So thank you for the introduction. Let me thank Vice Minister Swasil Nazara, DG Treasury Pak Hadianto, and other Ministry of Finance colleagues, my fellow speakers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think the concept of this BLU Expo is a great idea, so congratulations to the committee, because it really is an excellent opportunity to reflect on the public services that most of us are using day to day, and really ask questions about what is our vision for these BLU? Are they delivering that? And what can we do better? So in our presentation today, we want to cover a few points. Next slide, please. We break this into 4 parts. First, we look at the historical context and state of BLUs. Some of this has been presented by Professor Chandra already, so we can cover that relatively quickly. The second part is really looking at the characteristics and strengths of BLUs to deliver public services, because these are the areas of their comparative advantage, and we want to make sure, of course, that those opportunities are being exploited fully. The third part really looks at that in more detail, in the sense that we focus on the pandemic and the effective response of BLUs during the pandemic. Pandemic meant flexibility was needed, and the BLUs were in the health sector were particularly effective in response. Of course, that doesn't mean that the financing situation was necessarily easy, but in terms of public service delivery, which was their primary goal, I think it was successful. And the fourth part, we really hone in on 3 particular recommendations for strengthening the delivery of public services through BLU. Just to note, as Tasha indicated, I will just do the beginning part of this, and my colleague Rulan Rinaldi will pick up the presentation from after, I think, for the second section. So next, please. So the first slide really just gives a snapshot, somewhat similar, but perhaps represented a little bit differently than Professor Chandra did. The way I like to think about this is we go back to 2003, when the state finance law was prepared, passed, and set the public finances on the course which they still follow today. But like many countries, budgets are not always well suited to deliver public services, and it was not long after that state finance law that the BLU concept was developed. And we see the growth of the BLUs through the decade of the 2000s, accelerating particularly in 2009-10 with the arrival or the joining of the government-owned hospitals, and then the legal entity public universities. I think we've seen 3 numbers already now for the number of BLU. Swasil mentioned 252, Chandra mentioned 251, so our bid is 250. Not that the others are incorrect, but this is the data set on which we have prepared these slides. So next slide, please. So in terms of the role of BLU, as we've heard already, it's about public service delivery very much. And the spectrum of options between government spending, BLU and SOE is represented in the table on the left-hand side, and the idea that there is this difference between state management versus more commercially oriented management at the SOE end of the spectrum, with BLUs falling in the middle. Of course, while BLUs are non-for-profit, it says nothing about that they should not have, operate on strong governance and commercial principles, and that they can be professional and innovative. I think if you look around the world, one of the fastest growing set of enterprises are the social enterprises. So they, in a way, are the analogy of the private sector to the BLUs. So you see social enterprises sometimes set up by philanthropy or associations, which operate in a range of social areas, including education and health. And some of these social enterprises are the most innovative and most efficient enterprises operating. And that also helps shape, or could help shape, the vision for the BLUs. Noting on the right side, I'll just be very brief here, is the revenue, growing importance of revenue from BLU. The shares of revenue are shown on the lower right chart in yellow. But as was indicated earlier, much of this comes from on account of palm oil, and we'll look in more detail at that in a later slide. Next, please. So at this point, for this section, the following sections, I'm pass over to my colleague, Rulan. Rulan, over to you.
Yeah, so the next session will be delivered by Bapak Rulan Rinaldi, right? All right, you may continue the presentation. Operator, please unmute Bapak Rulan.
Okay, thank you, moderator. So, iterating what Pa David has mentioned before, a BLU is first and foremost a public service agency. While they are expected to generate revenue, by design, they're operating at non-profit principle. Loaning the term that Prof. Chandra used, they are essentially a semi-public goods. This, in turn, allows them to provide services in area where private sector presence is rather limited. In this part, we will highlight the consequential role of BLU in public service delivery. And one good example of such role is the 8 airport operator BLU that are operating in an area communication infrastructure. We also have BACTI, which manage contribution from telecommunication provider to the Universal Service Coverage Fund and put the fund into good use in providing telecommunication access to remote areas. And if we're moving on to the next slide, please. On the healthcare front, BLU are assets. They provide healthcare delivery and also a fundamental blocks in our healthcare resilience. BLU hospitals tends to be a larger hospital with large bed capacity, providing affordable healthcare service at mass. Currently, the number of BLU hospital are only represent around 3% of total hospital in Indonesia, but they contribute to 10% of total national healthcare capacity. Since they are integral part of the Indonesian government, they are within the span of control of the central government and can be quickly mobilized in the case of emergency, which is pretty evident during the COVID handling, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. And they become a fundamental part of our overall healthcare resiliency. Aside from health, another major area of value is education. The majority of education BLU are public university and several respectable and notable specialty schools such as STAN and STP, just to name a few. In number, they represent almost 30% of total public university, with even larger student roster of more than 70% of a public university students that are actually studying at education BLU. They provide affordable tertiary education with a single tuition fee. We also have other BLU, a fund manager BLU that also have an important role and notable impact on education, such as the LPDP or Lembaga Pengelola Dana Pendidikan, which manage around 20 trillion rupiah of endowment fund and that are able to provide scholarship for more than 9,000 students, with the majority of them are pursuing master and doctoral degree. And moving on to the next part, we actually getting into the context of today of BLU during the hard times. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Okay, while BLU are non-profit, they do generate non-tax revenue, which are becoming increasingly important, like just by David mentioned before, in the state budget. Even during the pandemic, the non-tax revenue from BLU is strong, with more than 40% growth during the year of 2020. That trends continued to 2021, where non-tax revenue breaks a record high of almost 96 trillion rupiah as of October 2021. In fact, comparing to other revenue stream in the state budget, BLU is the only revenue stream that has positive growth during the whole year of 2020. And if we take a look at the next slide, the rising CPO price provides the tailwind during the pandemic that contributes to the increase in revenue. This is supported by strong performance of Indonesian Palm Oil Plantation Fund Management Agency, or we know it as BPDP Kelapa Sawit. However, upon closer look, the strong revenue growth of BLU, while remarkable, is not an indication that BLU were immune to the economic shock brought about by COVID-19. Aside from the BPDP Kelapa Sawit, the onset of COVID-19 pandemic hurts the majority of BLU. Here we classified relatively loosely all the 250 BLU by sectors, and we found that almost all of them, with only a few exceptions, are hurt during the pandemic, as indicated by negative growth in their revenue. The only BLU, at least from some selected sample, that record growth in revenue is PIP, Pusat Investasi Pemerintah, and BPDP Kelapa Sawit. There are other BLU also book positive revenue growth, but as we can see here from the dotted here in the scatter plot represent one BLU. When a BLU is located on the upper side of the chart, it's indicate a negative growth in 2020. And we can see that the majority of them are record a negative growth. But this is not an isolated case. This is happening all over to the rest of the economy. And if we moving on to the next slide, the other consequential role of BLU is to be put it into contemporary context, is on pandemic handling. During the early onset of the pandemic, the role of health BLU was consequential. 22 out of 132 hospitals that are assigned for COVID handling during March of 2020 are BLU hospitals, while the rest are mostly local government hospitals. BLU hospital tends to be a larger hospital that are technically more ready in terms of equipment and human resources. Fast forward to today, as more hospitals are becoming the designated COVID referral hospital, including private hospital, BLU now only consists around 4% of total referral hospital in number. But the number of BLU hospital itself are increasing for the COVID referral hospital. Now, almost 3/4 of a BLU hospital are a designated COVID referral hospital. But as we can see on the next slide, this do come with consequences. Health BLU revenue took quite a hit during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly for bigger hospitals. Higher operational costs and decreasing revenue from non-COVID services contributes to this deterioration in revenue. Only 23% of hospital BLUs can achieve their revenue target in 2020, compared to more than 60% in 2019. However, from public safety point of view, this is a small price to pay considering the alternatives. BLU hospitals are one of the important key in the overall pandemic handling. Health BLU non-profit emphasis and how they operate allows for this intensive supporting role. And on the other front, during the pandemic handling, next slide, please. BLU also has a consequential role in providing support to MSME, micro, small, medium enterprises during the pandemic. MSME support by itself is already an area that the conventional bank and financial institution are reluctant to touch, and PIP filling up the slack by taking a market niche where the customer won't be even eligible for KUR. In partnership of several SOEs, even before the pandemic, the Pusat Investasi Pemerintah or PIP is managing and distributing funds to provide supports to unbankable microfirms. During the pandemic, as operational disruption and lower demand hurt a substantial number of microfirms, PIP are not backing away. Instead, they are doubling down on their outreach, providing support to more than 1.7 million MSME. More than double their pre-COVID target of 800,000 MSME in 2020. In addition, the database of microfirm owner from PIP also become one of the backbone of the data that is used to deliver BEPUM or the MSME grant during the height of the pandemic. And moving on to the next part. In previous part, we have talked in depth regarding the role of BLU and how the nonprofit emphasis of BLU operation allows them to undertake service delivery where private sector might have some reluctance in doing so. There are areas where BLU could make improvement to be able to deliver even better public service delivery. We identify we can make some improvement, at least in the case of health BLU, in efficiency, performance, and reliance on APBN. We do have some issue in this area, and recognizing this drawback, better cash flow and debt management along with more relevant KPI will lead to a better public service delivery. If we can move on to the next slide, please. At a more granular level, we conduct a brief diagnostic on the condition of the financial condition of BLU, and we found that revenue stream from APBN is quite unpredictable in terms of which item from goods and service expenditure that can be financed through APBN. Predictability are important for BLU to be able to forecast its expenditure and also allocating their budget appropriately between operational and capital spending. Consistent earmarking of APBN revenue to itemized spending that tied with performance target will provide some certainty to BLU in doing their operation. We can also see that account receivable for health BLU are particularly high compared to industry standard. The backlog in JKN receivable constitute most of this account receivable. This in return require health BLU to hoard cash, sometimes more than is actually needed. More cash in reserve the less BLU can spend on more urgent and strategic spending, such as capital spending to improve its medical equipment and any ad hoc spending that require immediate attention. And in the next slide, the aforementioned issues also coupled with the reluctance of BLU in taking up liabilities, particularly long-term liabilities, which leads to limited option for financing. While it is permitted for BLU to take on liabilities with additional approval from the Ministry of Finance, differing perception on the technical details of such commitment from the management of BLU itself, internal and independent auditors have caused reluctance from BLU. A clear technical and auditing guidelines will allow BLU to take confidently taking a measured risk in issuing liabilities to finance its strategic planning, such as capital expenditure. Last, the other diagnostic that we did is on performance assessment. Our evaluation of some selected health BLUs shows that KPI designation can be improved to better reflect actual performance assessment instead of administrative metric. Our simple comparative analysis of some selected BLUs, in this case is RSCM and RS Persahabatan, shows that compared to a more proper performance assessment list from WHO, the KPI being designated for RSM and RSP only fulfills some portion of it. And some indicators are very tailored, very specific, and will make it hard to be compared across other hospitals. And a more adequate and relevant performance assessment, along with any required corrective action, can be done properly and timely if we could assign a relevant technical KPI, either for technical accountability or financial accountability, to the line minister and Ministry of Finance. And I believe that is some of the improvement area that we were able to identify to improve the public service delivery quality of BLU. And on the next slide, to summarize the presentation, I would like to make some takeaways point. First, BLU is an extension of line ministries under financial supervision from Ministry of Finance that is responsible for delivery of revenue-generating public service. The emphasis on non-profit public service allows BLU to bring affordable and quality public service and to be there when private sector presence is limited. So it is an asset for Indonesia. BLU revenue are increasingly becoming more important in the state budget. However, BLU are first and foremost are a public service agency. The value of BLU really evident during the pandemic handling, where they have consequential role in the healthcare front and also in supporting MSME. A better governance and financial management through improvement in cash flow and debt management, along with relevant KPI assignment, are essential to improve the overall BLU performance. And I think that's conclude our presentation from Prospera. I think it's all back to you, Butasha.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Bapak Rulan, and also thank you, Mr. Neller, for making your time to share these insights. That was a comprehensive presentation from the historical context of BLU to BLU's role in delivering public services, where the presence of private sector is limited, and also in supporting economic recovery. All right, everyone, it's time for the Q&A session. We have a couple of questions coming in from the audience and will be answered by the speakers. Okay, let me read the first one. Okay, we're still waiting for the question to come in. Okay, we have it now. The question is from Kinanti to Professor Chandra. So the question is, one of BLU characteristics is operated in business-like manner, but is there any benchmarking of BLU's performance to similar sector in private sector? For example, compare BLU hospital performance to private hospital, or compare BLU university to private university. How is the financial performance measurement to BLUs, since the main objective of BLU is delivering service and not for profit? Mr. Chandra, you can unmute yourself, please.
Okay, thank you, Tasha.
Yeah.
I think according to our experience, we have some BLU that may be a good business in the profit terminology, especially in the health sector. We have some rumah sakit daerah or rumah sakit umum that this hospital could perform not only in the services but also in the finance, like Rumah Sakit Dr. Sutomo in Surabaya. I think this hospital has a good performance. It's not only because of PLU, but I think they have a good business, and this is very important. The second one is, I think, like Pak David or Pak Ronald already described us, this is very important for us to make the principle of the BLU. I think it's not only digitalization, but also we have to change our organization into the business perspective. Like we implement our KPI, like Ronald said, it's not only in the administration things. So the performance indicator is really should be achieved through a good business process, through implementing GCK, for example. It is like normal in the business sectors, but maybe for BLU it is a new one, and we still need to learn and time to change our organization before. Okay, Tasha.
All right, thank you for your answer, Professor Chandra. Up next, we have a question from Satrio Dimas Hendrawan to Ms. Barbara Ubaldi. The question is, before we digitalize the public services, we should understand the structure of our community. It's because our communities may consist of different generations, and unfortunately, not all people have access to internet and information technology. And also, I think not everyone has smartphone, especially for the elder generation or people in remote areas. And this pandemic shows us that many students still have difficulties in doing the online learning. Internet access is not cheap in developing countries like Indonesia. So with all of these considerations, what are the impacts of digitalization? Is there any negative impact? And is it widens the gap of equity in our own community?
Hi, thank you very much for the question, which is indeed a very important question. Because if we look at the intersections between technology and let's say, the efficiency of public governance to deliver results, we see the opportunities, but there's an important potential challenge, which is the one of increasing exclusion. Exclusion from opportunities in terms of being able to access better services. So definitely, there's a risk, and I think the pandemic demonstrated quite clearly that one of the legacy of the crisis that we will bring with ourselves will be inequality of access to opportunities. So bearing in mind that the risk of digitalization is the one of creating new forms of exclusion, understanding, like I said before, the needs of our users, and the needs of the users in country A might be different from the needs of the users in country B, understanding and knowing who are the people that we serve, where they are located, who are those who are less likely to be able to go online because of connectivity problems, because of lack of skills, because of lack of capacities, but also because of lack of trust, will enable us to come up with a dedicated specific strategy on how to respond to these needs. So I totally agree that we need to be aware of the fact that on one side, technology provides important opportunities, to improve the responses we give to the citizens. But on the other side, it also poses new potential challenges. So we need to be extremely aware that there are already inequalities in terms of being able to make the most of the digital opportunities. We not only need to take them into account, but we need to avoid creating new ones. So again, I go back to the idea that if we want to provide better services, we need to understand and know better who are the people that we serve. And we need to remember that especially in a country like Indonesia, where the size of the country and the complexity of the geography of the country makes it very important to understand that not all people have the same needs, even across a single country. So it's not only, differences between countries, but also differences within countries that need to be taken into consideration. And last point, the fact that many people may have a smartphone to interact with each other does not mean that they know how to use the smartphone in the best possible way to interact with the public sector. So knowing the users, but also having dedicated strategies to increase the accessibility, but also to build the awareness and the capacities of the people will be essential.
All right, thank you for your answer. So understanding the needs and the norms of the user or our customers is important to providing inclusive and universal access to providing best service to our customers or to our stakeholders. Thank you. Okay, one last question from me to Pak Rulan. So according to your presentation, better cash flow and debt management is essential to improve BLU's performance. But in reality, since the pandemic hit last year, BLUs, especially the ones in the health sector, experienced cash shortage and therefore were given more funding from the state budget in order to meet the needs in handling the pandemic. So from the cash flow and debt management perspective, what to improve in order to be more financially sustainable and independent?
Okay, so I think it's actually re-emphasize the point that we presented before. BLU is an asset because they are within the span of control of the central government, and they are operating a non-profit principle. Yes, we expect them to be efficient, we expect them to be productive, but they are a public service agency first and foremost. So it is acceptable and quite expected for the BLU hospital to book such a loss during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, if we talk about moving forward, an improvement in overall management of cash flow, debt management, and KPI for not only health BLU, but all BLU, we shouldn't make the COVID-19 period as our baseline. In normal times, then we can improve the overall performance and quality of public service delivery by addressing this issue in cash flow management for BLU to have a more predictable cash flow, which allow them to allocate their spending appropriately and have the luxury of make a projection and a strategic planning ahead and make a long-term plan for capital expenditure for example. And performance assessment, no doubt, is also an essential role for accountability, and also to what the most important in performance assessment is to be able to make a corrective action. If we know what's wrong in certain BLU, then we know what to do to improve it. And I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you so much for your answer. Of course, we understand that we are living in the extraordinary time that requires also extraordinary measures, and hopefully in the future, better cash flow strategy can be applied, especially to the BLUs. All right, that was the last question. Thank you so much for all the speakers for your insight and also for your knowledge. We are all inspired. So everyone, can you please give a round of applause for the speakers? Virtual applause. And ladies and gentlemen, we had such a fruitful discussion and we have learned so much about the roles of state agencies and BLU in strengthening public service and economic recovery. Before we close this webinar, everyone, if you may, those who joined via Zoom, please turn on your camera and let's have our pictures taken. Mungkin Bapak Ibu yang sudah bergabung melalui Zoom bisa dinyalakan kameranya. Kita akan mengabadikan momen ini. Oke, I'll do the countdown. 3, 2, 1. Next slide. And last slide ya. Alright, another round of applause please. That wraps up our afternoon. I'd like to thank Direktorat PPK BLU Ministry of Finance of Indonesia for hosting this webinar and BLU Expo 2021. Once again, thanks to all the speakers who have given us so much insight and knowledge. And of course, I thank you all for making your time to join this webinar. I'd like to remind you to follow our Instagram on @ppkblu and participate in all the quizzes about BLU Expo 2021 to win the prize. So on behalf of the team who is working today, I'd like to say thank you everyone for joining in. I am Tasha Kamila. It has been a pleasure to moderate this discussion. I wish you a pleasant day, stay safe and stay healthy.